Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Carledge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. But we will get started on this episode where I am super excited to welcome back to the show for part 2 of our conversation, the awesome Juliana DeWillems. If you listener haven't listened to the first part of our conversation, you can find it in the previous episode on whatever app you're listening to the show on. In that episode, we explored Juliana's journey in getting started with positive reinforcement animal training and what led her to her current work as social media extraordinaire and co-host of the Live from the Ranch monthly live broadcast with Ken Ramirez, amongst a whole bunch of other things. If you haven't listened to it yet, you are, of course, welcome to just hang out with us and start here with part 2, where you're still going to gain plenty of insights to help you grow your skills, knowledge, and confidence in animal training. Juliana, welcome back, and thanks so much for coming to hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm very happy to be here again.
Well, let's dive straight into this one. I'm excited to talk about management today. I don't think we've done a whole podcast episode in 260 episodes, whatever we're up to now, specifically on management. I've lent into dedicating this one to that because you've recently written a book recommended by Ken Ramirez called Manage It: Hacks for Improving Your Dog's Behavior. Tell us about this, Juliana. How did this book come about?
This book came about because I, said, maybe I should try writing a book. And then I thought, what would I write about? And I thought, wait a second, I love management, and no one has ever written a whole book on management before or yet. So
or done a whole
why don't
episode.
Right, exactly. Well, that's what, and when you're like, we haven't done a whole, that's usually the sentiment. It's like, oh, we talk about it or it's mentioned, but we haven't really done a deep dive into it. And I basically wrote the book that I wanted to see in the world, because I just feel really strongly it's an excellent resource for pet parents. And I think it's a really helpful, technique, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully we'll define it in a second, for dog trainers and pet trainers as well.
Yeah, well, let's go there then. Let's define management, and it makes me curious. Do you have different definitions of it if you're talking to different audiences? If you're talking to your general, I don't like this word, but for lack of a better word at the moment, layman pet parent versus pet professionals, do you modify the definition somewhat depending on the audience?
For both audiences, I would say the general definition of management is just manipulating the environment to increase or decrease certain behaviors from occurring. And the only way I might tweak that for somebody who understands the science of learning and behavior would be to say using antecedent arrangement to increase or decrease the likelihood of behaviors occurring. But antecedent arrangement and environment are pretty interchangeable. And so I think either definition really captures what management is.
Yeah, makes me contemplate uh, what my definition of training for the audience of people who are there specifically to learn from me about training.
Hmm.
And a distinction I make personally, and not saying there's any right or wrong to anyone else, it says things differently. I just have clarity when I'm teaching people what I mean when I say terms. And so training being defined in that context I just described as the intentional and strategic setting up of antecedents and consequences to modify behavior, which sounds really similar to what you're saying, manipulating the environment to change behavior. However, with regards to the definition you offer, pet pro professionals or animal training professionals, if you're not working with pets, is a large focus on the antecedent component of our ABCs.
Yep, exactly. Where, like you mentioned, training, and I think a lot of us, especially as positive reinforcement trainers, when I first started learning about positive reinforcement, we put so much emphasis on the C, on the consequence. And then of course, as you learn, you realize how important the antecedent arrangement is in influencing the behavior. And so you learn about the importance of both. And yes, I think management essentially puts most of the focus on changing the environment, where of course behaviors happen and then consequences happen, but management is really increasing or decreasing the behaviors that you're seeing through the antecedents.
And from where I'm sitting, this is also super helpful for pet professionals, though, or professionals working with animal trainer, not necessarily pets, for various reasons. Because one, the listeners of the show, our audience, we just love geeking out about animal training. Two, because we can always learn more about anything, including management, even if the ideas might not be new to us. There's always such huge value, in my personal opinion, in hearing things worded in different ways. And I think knowing the specific content of resources like the one you've made gives people doing consults something else to reach for and to recommend as they shall provide for pet owners if they have clients that this would benefit and like to absorb, and if their clients like to absorb information in this way. I know not all clients like to be given homework and handed a book and said, you need to read this. They'll be like, I didn't sign up for this. But for those clients who are inclined to want to learn more and would benefit from having resources. I know a lot of people they just want resources, like they want to be able to lean on things. So I think there's a huge benefit for obviously the pet owners that the book's targeted at, but for the reasons I've suggested and potentially more, the book is a really great resource for pet professionals as well. Are these things that you kind of thought about, or do you want to add anything else to that?
Thank you. Yes, totally. The book is definitely geared towards the average person with a dog. I think there's a huge need for the public to learn about management and understand it. And within the book, I was able to, man, what a great opportunity to just like put all my thoughts in one place about what I feel about behavior and share the science and share why management, while it does decrease behavior, it is not the same as punishment, which we can talk about, and why so like if you have options between the two, management can be, better for your dog or for your pet. And so I was able to educate about the science of learning and what management is. And I even, got to sneak in a whole chapter about like enrichment and meeting your dog's needs. So I packed a lot of really helpful information. The book is really split into two parts. The first third is, again, kind of talking about learning and dog behavior and dog needs and how to approach behavior with your dog. And then the second two thirds, second and thirds are chapter by chapter going through different behavior challenges and explaining different management options. So we've got like barking inside, barking on your deck, barking at triggers on walks, chewing stuff in your house, loose leash walking, coming when called. We have like a miscellaneous chapter. We have a puppies chapter. I essentially made it so that you can educate yourself about how dogs learn and how to approach their behavior. And then if you needed to, you could just flip to the chapter that you want, that would be most helpful to you. Although I have heard of people saying they wanted to read additional chapters to get more ideas. But yes, it's definitely for pet guardians, and it should be a really helpful resource for your clients. And I think there's so much to talk about from a behavior analysis perspective of what exactly is management in the ABCs, when we are manipulating the antecedents, what exactly is happening. So there's tons to talk about in both directions.
Yeah, and I feel like this is the antecedent part is something that just yesterday, coming up to 20 years of doing this, I was a student of, and that is, I've been working on a trick title with my cat, Tilo, just a novice one, but for about 5 years, because sometimes I might go 3 or 4 months between training sessions, just because that's what my life has looked like with my young family. And so anyway, I've managed to train, I think, 3 times this week, which is like unheard of.
Crazy.
I know. I thought I'd have a crack at training the selfie behavior. So that means that you kind of sit down and the cat comes up behind you, puts 2 feet on your shoulder and looks at the camera, right? You get a good selfie. And I thought, okay, cool. I will train the cat to target its 2 front paws to something, elevate it, and then kind of like transfer that station to my shoulders. Because I just had a like trial session and cat had no idea when I just tried to lure it on there. It's getting all confused and going all over the place. So anyway, I had a session 2 days ago, and the cat was putting its paws on the station, and the station was elevated a little bit, and like it was doing it reliably. And then went in yesterday, and the cat kind of like just came up and like sat down in front of the little station and stared at me. But it just made me realize like how reinforced that behavior is. Like the environment for that cat is saying what works here is sitting down in front of dad and looking at dad. I'm assuming, because I don't know what the cat's thinking, because dad's going to provide me with more information and then I can get some like yummy treats, right? And I'm like, that's my bad. Like, like I've set this up so that when we're training in my office, like that is what the cat does. And so I'm fighting, like, to use Dr. Jesus Rosales Ruiz's words, I'm fighting extinction there, right? I'm saying like, don't do what works for you. Don't do what the environment's telling you to do. Do something else instead. And like, why would the cat do that? Right.
Right.
And that's all in the antecedent position. All of that's a long-winded way to say, like, I feel that it's something, as you said, we focus on the consequence part that we just often overlook. And you said it, I think you said in your book that you talk about meeting the dog's needs and enrichment. And so those parts are, I think, powerful tools that we as an industry can leverage more. And so I think that bleeds into the reason why you wrote this book. Are your thoughts kind of similar to mine in that? Have I kind of really long-windedly summed it up?
Well, so one, like when I finally connected the dots and had this like moment of how much the environment influences behavior, my head was like blown, which I know feels like, behavior analysis 101. And I'm like sheepishly admit that this was years and years into my career as a dog trainer. Like I understood like, I think we talk about it a lot under the guise of like, or under the like set your dog up for success. Like we all try to set our dogs up for success, and you set your dog up for success by thinking about what can I do in this situation to help them be successful. And a lot of us are naturally doing antecedent arrangement there. And then when I really realized where the environment and the antecedents influence behavior, because like without antecedents, there is no behavior. That's the antecedents, and which is, by the way, part of management. There are many different ways to manipulate antecedents. And one form of management is to just eliminate the antecedent and take it off the table, because if there is no antecedent / cue, there is no behavior. But that relationship is very empowering to understand. Even something as simple as like, if you walk on one side of the street with your dog versus the other side of the street, you're going to get different behavior because there are different conditions happening. There are different antecedents depending on where you're walking. And interestingly, the chapter that I have about meeting needs and enrichment and stuff like that, it was the chapter where I was like, you can't manage your way out of like meeting your dog's needs. So, which I wanted to make it very clear, like management, yes, is a band-aid for behavior problems. In my opinion, is that's not a problem generally, but we can't like band-aid a dog who is like under enriched and unfulfilled and that type of thing. That being said, enrichment falls under the distant antecedent category and potentially motivating operations or abolishing operations for behavior that can show up later that day or in that scenario. And that's helpful to understand too, which is also something that I'm like just slowly starting to melt into my brain. It's one of those things, you're a drug trainer for over a decade. You're like, I've learned so much. And then suddenly you find yourself as a new learner. But wow, again, how empowering it is to understand this. So me thinking I'm talking about this simple topic of management has opened up this whole new world of the antecedents in the environment and the power that the environment has on behavior. I mean, it's everything.
Maybe just quickly for those who are listening to this, and also for those who are there's two people, those who are listening and maybe like a little bit lost because they're like, what is it say? Abolishing or what?
I know.
Like right, but like you're not in a space where like the majority of people don't understand it. A lot of our listeners are quite knowledgeable, but also like there are some who are like, I don't want to lose because I just want to make sure that we kind of clearly state what we're talking about. So can you just like offer a few definitions of some of the things we talked about there? Like why can't we, in your words, why can't we band-aid something if we're not meeting needs? Like just unpack it a little bit. And then I think some terms you use here, motivating operations, abolishing operations, like, and just unpack some of those nerdy, slightly more nerdy terms for us.
Yeah. And please, Ryan, like jump in with your expertise on this too, because again, I'm actually like a very new learner on a lot of these things where like I might have seen the topics or like, Dr. Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals course. I certainly learned it then when I took it back in 2017. Came and went in my brain. I'll tell you what, I felt like I had never seen that term before when it showed up a few years later. And then taking some of my, certification exams, like once upon a time, I thought I had a grasp on these things and I don't. So the first part of your question, basically, like if you have a dog who is not getting enough exercise, is not having any outlets to be a dog, and they're like jumping on people or they're barking out the windows and you're wanting to manage those behaviors, you risk not making any progress with management or making minimal progress with management because the real issue is like your dog just needs more. Your dog, you need to figure out ways to meet their needs a little bit better through whatever variety of enrichment and exercise and training or whatever you choose. And that management can help a lot of things, but not a dog who is not having their needs met. And so, okay, let me make sure that I can remember these definitions correctly. Essentially, there's like this, from my understanding, and it like pains me to think that like if Kiki Ablon ever listens to this episode, Kiki's my like Susan Friedman. She helps me so much with my behavior analysis stuff. Or like, anyway, I'm putting this out on the internet. I could be wrong and I'm okay with that. So motivating operations are essentially something that increases the value of the reinforcer. So for example, if the dog has not had a meal in a long time, that is going to make the value of the food increase. And an abolishing operation is going to have the opposite effect. So say, for example, a dog is pulling to get to a sniff and you let them go get the sniff and they get a sniff it all up. The sniff is no longer valuable. And so they no longer behave to access the sniff. I see you nodding your head. So what do you think? Was that okay?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, shout out to Kiki because she's awesome. Secondly, I think what this conversation's helping me appreciate is that even as professionals, like me with my cat yesterday, we're like afterwards, I watched my video on my cat training, and I'm like, oh yeah, the cat did this. I didn't actually have a plan for like what I was going to do, and the cat did what I didn't want them, and of course the cat's not going to do what I wanted them to do because I didn't set the environment up well. There's all these bits and pieces where you're like, I just like paid loads of money for teaching this last week, and like I go doing a training session myself, and I'm like even doing any of that stuff. So thanks for your vulnerability. Um, and then also, it made me contemplate on some reflections recently where I was exploring the dynamics of my relationship with another person, and some of the conversations and patterns we get into, and then always wanting to filter things through an ABA lens. Yeah, had the reflection that everyone's behavior makes sense for them, otherwise they wouldn't do it, right? And the only reason they're doing it is because there's reinforcers there. But how often I forget that in human interactions, right? Because we suck, I think personally anyway, at generalizing behavior, right? So if you're working with another human learner and you see things differently and you're using words to discuss your different perspectives on the same item, and you've got certain behaviors associated with how you choose to discuss those things, then that all makes sense to the individual. And like, if it was a dog, you'd be like, yeah, that's cool. Like, let's do what we do as professionals. But if it's a human, you're like, I'm so emotional. Like, and like you lose that. And so anyway,
Mhm.
the thing that's making me appreciate is we're talking about management, and we're talking about my training with Tila yesterday. We're talking about terms we use. Like, I think it's easy to forget the simple things sometimes in the disorientation of life.
Mhm.
Like, have you found that? Like, and I feel like that's what you were expressing. Like, writing this book has
Well,
helped you ground yourself and get somewhat in the antecedents.
yeah, and I think you take in so much information. It's like what Ken says with don't shoot the dog. Like every time he reads it, he's like, how did that get in there? It's this like you learn something or you hear something, and then you hear the same exact thing years later, but you have so much different experience and so much different perspective, so it just hits different, and it totally shows up differently. I mean, I remember the first time like I heard about like pattern games with Control Unleashed, and I was like, when would I ever use that baby trainer? Like, like little did she know. And then years later, I see the value and how incredibly effective they can be and helpful. So you things click differently. And I feel like now after a decade, I'm slowly starting to get this clearer grasp on behavior. Again, thanks to my wonderful colleagues. Kiki has shaped a lot of my learning in the last couple of years. But yeah, I think that there's just a lot of input when you first become a trainer, and things they just don't land in your brain the same way that they might a few years later.
Yeah, I think that's a really great addition and thing to remember as well. And that's, I think, circles back to one of the benefits I said for professionals reading your book is it helps center us back in the basics as well. Maybe because like two things. Firstly, Juliana, like I started Animal Training Academy, and then because we focus on behavior, coming from a decade of working as an employee in zoos to starting a business that focuses on behavior for all earthlings or predominantly non-human, but that made 80% of our pie dog trainers, right? And so entering the dog industry, that was a decade ago now, and not knowing the dog industry, I just had my glasses on, my behavior analyst glasses on, right? I was like, what's the antecedent, what's behavior, what's the cue? I don't know any of the baggage that's in the dog industry.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, was that the right thing to say, baggage? But I think people know what I mean.
Right.
Like, there's a
Yes,
there's
no,
a
of
there's a culture,
course. I think
right?
I think it's so important to realize like the relationship humans and dogs have, like we totally bring baggage to the training.
Yeah, and so like
I don't think it's a bad thing.
it was a really interesting time to have conversations with people then, because I'm like, what are you talking
Hmm.
about? Like,
Right.
like the dog's doing this observable behavior in the presence of this antecedent for this consequence,
Yes.
and like it was
Right.
that
Like
simple.
as Karen Pryor says, it's just behavior.
Yeah, yeah. So that, like there's that, but I think like then the reading the book like that now to bring it back to the antecedents, like I think it can help clear some of the fog. Like Susan Friedman talks about cultural fog with
Yes.
regards to like a lack of knowledge, but I think there becomes some fog with regards to opinions shared on social media and culture that the science gets a backseat.
Yep. Yeah, I am eagerly nodding my head. Yeah, totally. We love making up stories about dogs and why they behave the way that they do. And I mean that even, of course, like, all the pack leader nonsense, like that is like the worst story, but it goes the other direction too. Positive reinforcement traders love making up stories. And that was again another brain explosion moment for me when I realized, oh yeah, they're just responding to something in the environment. Um, and this, I guess, like with your audience, it's not controversial or at all, like to take a behavior analysis lens. But for me, it's really actually helped significantly because I spent years in my career, like trying to follow the stories and trying to like essentially throw the spaghetti at the wall, but I had no idea why things worked, how things worked. Like I was just following these protocols or these things that people said like would help because of this, this, and this. And now that I've kind of come back full circle to realize, yeah, you can actually really simplify your life if you're simplify your work as a dog trainer if you're paying close attention to antecedents and consequences, especially to antecedents. Although, of course, we can't forget the consequences too. I'm not saying those aren't important, but when we're focusing specifically on management, we're really looking at the antecedents. I personally feel like it makes life easier.
Yeah, makes it maybe harder in regards to engaging in conversation
Like harder
because,
because when people don't see things the same way we do.
well, like, so I was just thinking back to being at Minute Century last week with the keepers in Australia, a zoo I consulted for those who don't know what the heck I'm talking about right now. And been here for 7 years, we've got all this old footage and stuff that we can use to kind of like talk about some of the behaviors and hearing. That's just one example, but the dog training industry is the same. Like hearing, oh, this happens because of that, and then
Mm-hmm.
there was an example where some parrots were screaming at someone in a way that was deemed undesirable, and it was because the uniform that the keepers were wearing. But I said, "How do you know that?" And then we tested that,
Yep.
and we sent someone walking past with a uniform and a camera, and the birds just looked at them, didn't do anything
Mm-hmm.
vocally, and then there was confusion and contemplation that it was a specific keepers in the uniform. So we tested that, and then it wasn't. And I
Mm-hmm.
just so more challenging to engage in conversations because one, if you don't have authority,
Mm-hmm.
and I use that word in terms of you're a trusted source of reliable knowledge,
Right.
and you are able to help someone, and two, yeah, well that if you don't have that, and people are sharing stories, and like who are you to like question that? Like, do you have data to back this up, or like what Alexander Curlin says, like you can go to animals for answers and humans for opinions, like that.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, right. So
Yes.
that's fair, like, and because it makes me think to our marketing as dog trainers, and we're setting up our websites, and we're all like, "Yo, I don't help you build your relationship with your dog," and like people are like,
Mm-hmm.
"I don't care, like I just don't want them to jump on people when they come to my front door." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's two like aspects I think to dog trainers often making websites. One is like how I look to my peers, and two is like how I can actually sell my products. And sometimes that second one comes later.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say hard, I mean like to be a professional in this industry where networking is important, because that fog in terms of narratives we form based on opinion rather than data. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Basically, we can find ourselves, I don't know if in conflict is the word, but sometimes in conflict with, again, the stories that people tell or believe, especially when talking about their dogs or dogs they work with often or species they work with often. They can come with beliefs and beliefs about why things are working. But my gosh, I love your example. Well, my question is, I love asking, how do you know? How do you know? Like, and then by asking that enough times or asking variations of that enough times, we come back to the observable behavior, which, is like you said, that's where the answers lie, not the opinions. And I love that you were able to test and gather a little bit of data to say, oh, do you think that's what's cueing the vocalizing? Let's see, and I think a lot of us who really just want what's best for the, like you said, the earthlings in our life, like we just want everybody happy. And so we're willing to like lead with some curiosity and help people find the answers themselves. And as professionals, knowing what questions to ask is the most important part. Oh, your dog jumps on people. Okay, well, when does the jumping start? Is it the moment somebody walks in? Is it when somebody reaches for your dog? Is it when your dog hears the doorbell? Like getting to the bottom of what the exact antecedent is really, really important. And therefore knowing what questions to ask to get to the bottom of that can be really helpful for your training plan. And then if you're focusing on behavior change through training, also saying, okay, well, what happens when your dog jumps up? What happens the moment that those paws go on the person? Like, what are you seeing? So having a very clear understanding of the science ourselves can help us guide these conversations in the productive directions that we know can be helpful.
Yeah, awesome. And so what I wanted to talk about today, as I say, like 30 minutes into this podcast, was thoughts and perspectives on what you think professionals in our interests most need to know about management. I thought we could just kind of rattle through a number of those. I think we're kind of like can summarize one or two in what we've just talked about, though. And one is to come back to the science.
Yes.
And understand management from like management is a term that can be defined in an infinite number of ways. But if we bring it back to the science, we're talking about antecedents and learning histories, understanding those things and manipulating them strategically and intentionally to modify behavior. Not as you used the word band-aid before, which I find interesting. And like I get it, but I also think like that. Tell me what you're wrong. I'll play the devil's advocate here. I also think that's like taking away from the importance of it. Like if it's a band-aid, like it's not something that we should take seriously. But like I think with a lot of I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not criticizing now.
No, I'm so grateful you're presenting this thought process.
Because like it could just be that all our clients need, and why would we overcomplicate them and try to teach them about science when they really don't care? And we can just change an antecedent strategically and intentionally and help them achieve their goals.
Yes. The answer is yes. Yes. So I think one, I completely agree with you. I mean, you know me, I'm like so pro management. I wrote a whole book on it. I love management. I talk a lot in the book about how to respond when people are like, well, you're just avoiding the problem. It's just a Band-Aid. And like my TLDR response to that is, yeah, and, like, so who cares if I'm avoiding the problem if it solves the problem for me? Yes, I am preventing my dog's barking by putting window film up. And if the window film was down, she would still bark, but the window film will be up for the rest of her life and she never barks. And that solves the problem for me with zero effort. So the book I dive into like giving guardians, empowering them with what to say to like Uncle Joe, the dog trainer, who says, what do you mean you're not going to teach her to not like jump into the trash? You're just going to put a lid on it. You're not teaching her right from wrong. I give some talking points to that. And I think pet professionals can take from that as well. And where I dive into the book of different people have different opinions on management. The only opinion that matters is yours, because then you can educate your clients about it and you can come up with solutions that work for everyone.
Let's talk about what some of those talking points are. But before that, so to hold on to that, folks, I do want to talk about that, but I don't want to lose my other thought. And that is that it's easy to understand like both sides of the coin. Like I can understand like we just need to put a lid on it, like problem solved. I can understand the perspective. I'm not saying there's right or wrong in either of these things, but I can understand the perspective of the client. So why you need those talking points, and I'm grateful that we've got an opportunity to talk about those. Because that sounds like it's changing perspectives. So acknowledging that it's important. Secondly, I find there's always immense value in comparing ourselves to dogs. I'm trying to think about a management issue where like that would be comparable to that, where it would make more sense. The best I've come up with in the short period of time I've had to think about this is just management for myself. So I don't eat certain fatty foods because they're not in my house because I don't buy them. And one
Right.
way I don't buy them is I shop online for my groceries. So I'm not even like physically in front of the item and tempted to buy the item. So that's just changing my antecedents,
Mhm.
which I don't think anyone would argue with. I don't know if that's comparable to the bin example though. Like, what are your thoughts?
No, so that's exactly, I completely agree with you. I think it is very beneficial to think of management from our own perspectives because we manage our own lives all the time. We manipulate our environments to increase or decrease certain behaviors all the time. And I actually end the book talking about this and citing a bunch of human examples of where we manage our own lives. An example being, like, we'll put our, if you want to wake up and do a workout early in the morning, if you put your clothes out easy to find, that's an environmental change in antecedent arrangement that makes it much more likely that you're going to wake up, grab your clothes, get dressed, and go. We, if there's traffic on your route, you're going to choose a different route, which is going to, well, one, change your driving behaviors, which could very easily change other behaviors that show up, your, behaviors we might label as rage. So we might pick the shortest line at the grocery store because what is it? Okay, like, that's still an environmental change. And this is where, when I start to talk about this, and I really have to think through it um, real time of like, okay, yes, the choosing the shorter line in the grocery store, well, that's technically a behavior. And this, by the way, also gets complicated. The consequence can become antecedents for something else, which is, and management can play into that, which I'd love to dive into too. Um, but by choosing the shorter line, you could like get out of the store more quickly. And so that's changing your environment to change the behavior and then consequence outcome. So humans do it all the time.
I had some thoughts. I don't know if your brain works this way, but my brain does. Like thoughts come and go so quickly. I was like,
That's
it was
so
there.
useful for podcast.
That's why I write everything down. At the start, I was
Good.
like, I'm constantly writing while people are talking. And you're like, interesting. But
Yeah.
that's because of my brain, like, is very unreliable. Um, so then talk us through these talking points. So you're at your client's house and you're like, he's like, how do I get Rover to stop jumping in the bin? And you're like, hey, I noticed this cupboard's empty. Do you mind if I put the bin in there? And you put the bin in the cupboard, and Rover's like, not jumping in the bin anymore. And he's like, you're not a trainer. Give me my money back. Like, he hasn't learned that's wrong because that's how we have to do things. Like, what are your talking points?
I think I would present them with three options. One is we just manage, we put it in the cupboard and we don't think about it again. And your problem is solved. If you don't feel like that's adequate, your second option is to fully train the behavior. 100% of the time, you are there ready to use your consequence to modify your dog's behavior. And it will take you 24/7. You will have to be on 100% of the time. And it might take, I don't know how long. It will likely take weeks. And we have to generalize all these different conditions. Like, if this is the job you want to do, great. I will certainly help you do that. Remember, we have option A sitting here. And option C, I would say, is a variation of both. When I'm here, we can work on behavior around the trash can. When I'm not here and you're not doing training, the trash can goes in the cupboard. So, which I would argue management is an important step in any behavior modification training plan. But so, like, whether the client is up for doing it or not, I think we need to implement it to prevent the rehearsal of the behavior. But I would essentially say, like, all right, you want to train? Cool. This is what it's going to look like. I bet a weekend they'd say, the cupboard's looking pretty good by now.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of it's got a word or got a name. Next time we talk, I'm going to quickly Google what that name is. It's like when you create a, for lack of a better word, moment argument where like it's illogical for them to choose anything other than
Right.
than the option you want to
Right.
present, depending on the individual and the reinforcers for them.
Right. And thank you for bringing up reinforcers for them, because I think that ties into exactly what you were saying. And I quoted Dr. Susan Friedman in my book, The Cultural Fog, that people believe in order for, I don't know, them to be worthy dog guardians or for their dog to be categorized as like a good dog. That their dog should be well trained and they're quote unquote well trained, and their dog should know right from wrong. And so they have this existing belief that it is only successfully trained or properly dealt with if they've, addressed the issue head on. And that's where education can be really valuable. Hey, it's only a problem for me if it's a problem for you. Saying as the professional, I think people find a lot of relief in hearing that it's okay to just manage the behavior. They're thinking, you know, I just turn around when I see a dog, and like that really works for us, but I know that we're avoiding the issue. Okay, well, you said it works for you. Not a problem to me.
I was multitasking then. And
Oh, did you find the word?
I'm just gonna go persuasive reasoning.
Oh, that sounds great. Yes, use your
Sounds-
persuasive reasoning. That sounds great.
So sorry, go on.
Yeah. I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
I think as dog trainers, we get really good at using persuasive reasoning, whatever that means. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're really reasonable. I mean, we often get questions in our community like, "What do you say in this situation?" to like hear like how others navigate it.
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of professionals working with clients,
I
meeting
think
the like average client's expectations,
yeah.
and where management comes into that?
I mean, so much of our job is expectation setting and education and meeting clients where they are. And so not forcing anything on them and not saying, well, if you want me to help your dog's reactivity, you have to stop going on walks. Like, I think it's really important to us to hear out clients' concerns and validate their concerns and explain to them, why actually this step would be beneficial. Okay, that doesn't work for you. Will this work for you? So that's going to be for anything you're wanting to implement, but especially with management. And, you can try to pitch it as like, look, you need a break from this behavior. Let's just try this for a month. Let's just try this for 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Let's reconvene at the end of that while we work on these other goals. And you tell me if the management is working for you or if you want to try something else.
Do you think for that this changes in different stages of people's career? I feel like for somebody who is quite new, and I think it potentially gets lost in what we call ourselves, like the dog training industry. Like you're brought in as a trainer. Do you think that it gets overlooked sometimes when also we as trainers go in with expectations about what we do?
I think, yeah, I think there was probably a lot of time where I felt like if I was suggesting management to a client and that was the only solution we were doing, that meant like I wasn't a good enough trainer. I wasn't an effective trainer. Like I was cheating. I wasn't really helping these people. Like again, meanwhile, I'm solving their problems. I think it can go both directions before you kind of get more experience. I think you can feel like, well, no, we have to do it this way. And so, kind of my way or the highway, even though we think that's helping, that can come off really, abrasive and aversive to clients if we're not flexible at all with what we want our clients to do in regards to management or anything else. And then it can also go like the minute somebody gives us pushback, okay, we won't do it. We won't do it. You're right. Or like not even suggesting something because we think it's not a good idea. And time and experience, I think, can address both of those as you get a little bit more confident and comfortable in advocating for the solutions that you recommend.
We're nearly towards the end of this episode. There's two things I'm thinking about. Though. One is that I don't know how to word this. Simple is better. Return to the basics. Lean on the science. Like I think there's a message in the conversation that we've managed to have today that that a book like yours can help remind us in terms of one of the benefits of the book. So there's that, and then I'm also, a human, and I'm like, is what I'm saying like super obvious? Like, if people out there listening to this going, "Duh, Ryan, like, why are we listening to you?" Because what? But I don't think it is. But at the same time, I do think it is.
Well, I think it's like one of
It's
those
the most
things
unclear
that
thing I've ever seen.
it feels simple to us, or it feels like it feels simple. It might be simple. And that's how I feel about management in general, and a lot of my training solutions these days. I put something on the internet that's like the most basic, like if you want your dog to do something more, give them a treat, and people are like, whoa, that's the best advice I've ever heard.
Right,
So
yeah, yeah.
you can say something that feels so straightforward and simple to you, but to somebody else who's hearing it either for the first time or presented that way, it is life changing. It is totally like new and life changing information. So I don't think we should, I think sometimes we can feel pressed to, we meaning trainers, to like find the next thing, or like, advance this way, or like find the cutting edge thing. But there's nothing new under the sun. So the more we can come back to, exactly like you said, the basics, while really getting thorough in our understanding of those and our application of those, I think is really, really beneficial. And that's why management, while it feels like this newer term and this newer concept, it is all rooted in what we already know about applied behavior analysis and the importance of antecedents and manipulating antecedents to increase or decrease the likelihood that a behavior occurs.
And it's making me think about the curse of knowledge. I don't know if that's accurate for this, but if you're listening, don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a phenomenon where you become more fluent and proficient in your trade, the skills that you have, and therefore you struggle to see what others don't know. And so, what seems really simple to you, and you don't even think about potentially explaining it, is like you said, I think you used the word revolutionary for others. But I'm wondering if like that's not really what I'm talking about. I think, and in terms of what this conversation is, it's like that curse of knowledge can make you potentially, even in yourself, like overcomplicate things. It makes me think about learning about degrees of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like you've got your piece of chicken for your dog, and like to give them degrees of freedom, they would have like 4 different ways to earn that piece of chicken, and then they've got like 3 degrees of freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like for the majority of us, like we're not doing that. Got like one way to earn the chicken when we're doing like cooperative care or something. But like if you hear that, you can be like, yo, I'm a bad trainer because I am not giving enough degrees of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe that like overcomplication that we get through the narratives that we hear in the dog industry and the stories, and that constant search for shiny objects can actually be detrimental to the basics.
Where we're
And
constantly like,
yeah, I know what I'm
yeah.
grasping for here. I think that we forget that the simplicity of using management sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I think, yes, you're absolutely right. Based on what you said, when it can start to feel like if you overcomplicate it, or you try to like learn all these new things, and then you're like, well, yeah, if it's just this simple thing, what do you mean that's really the answer? Like, what do you mean that can really be the solution? And I think that in addition to coming back to the basics with the science, also coming back to our goal of just like helping people and dogs, or helping animals, whether it's like animals in a zoo, or dogs or cats, or horses, whoever you're working with, like coming back to your goals of helping them and their families and their caretakers, like it's great. Simple to me feels like a win-win.
Yeah, maybe we need to like separate the simplicity of our roles, which is not obviously always the case. And as you said, we're not meeting needs, and that's not like there's other things to address, but obviously clients have limited resources, money, time, and interest, and doing all of the things. So that
Mm-hmm.
can be challenging, I think, for people. But we need that other space where we can get nerdy with our peers and colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Like,
And that's like, I think like building you're exactly right. Like you said earlier, like building your knowledge, you never want that to come. Well, unfortunately it can inevitably come, but losing sight of how, like, what was life like before we knew about behavior? Like we totally lose that perspective of being a new learner, being what do they like call that? Like, a beginner's mind. Like we will never have that perspective again. We will never not know about behavior. And, so putting ourselves in their shoes and trying to appreciate their perspectives can be very valuable when trying to mold our deep understanding of the science and the effective interventions we want to use.
Well, I've just learned that a beginner's mind is a concept from Zen Buddhism, often called Shoshin. That refers, did you know that? Shoshin?
Mm-mm.
It refers to approaching situations with an attitude of openness, curiosity, and lack of preconceptions, as if you were a complete beginner when you're experienced. Wow, I love Shoshin.
Yeah, doesn't that sound great? I mean,
Let's
that's
call
like,
this episode like building your
yeah.
Shoshin.
Yep.
I'm just going to jot that down. That pretty much brings us towards the end of the podcast. There's one last question. I don't know if I told you this beforehand, so if not, sorry for putting you on the spot. But we always like to ask our guests what they want to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in our animal training industry. So what would your thoughts be? What do you want to see happen in our industry?
I want people to continue to learn about and come back to the applied behavior analysis, quote unquote, basics. I want people to deepen their understanding of the ABCs and use that to guide their, you can still tell stories about what's going on, but do it from the lens of the ABCs, please. So I think learning more about that is going to empower us to come up with very effective, humane, kind solutions for our learners, and will the tide will raise all the ships if we all learn that and get better at that and get better at our practice and become more effective in our kind interventions.
Yeah, it makes me think some feedback I get about Animal Training Academy sometimes, Juliana, is people want to see content that is not so ABA focused, which I understand. And I guess I always in my mind go, it's not an issue because we have a dartboard, to use Susan Friedman's metaphor of behavior, and we have all of the rings on the dartboard. And all of those rings are different sister sciences, and we need the full dartboard, but we can choose to have a bullseye that is, in the case of our academy anyway, applied behavior analysis and doing our ABCs. And I feel like my knowledge on that subject, when I look at people who listen to my podcast and probably slam their forehead into their palm and go, Ryan, what are you talking about when they're talking about behavior analysis? Because they're like professors at university, and I'm being arrogant thinking that universities of applied behavior analysis professors of applied behavior analysis at universities listen to this podcast. If you are, shout out to you. But like, yeah, we have our bullseye. So I love that. I think when we're thinking about learning and we're thinking about behavior, that's like super important. And obviously in saying that, we're not obviously taking away from all of the other important sciences.
No.
Which
I think you guys have a really great bubble here, which like, I guess that was, I don't know, maybe I could have had a different perspective, but I like in the rest of the dog training world, we're not as, I think the industry as a whole still has some ways to go in understanding this lens and the benefit of this lens and the inevitable nature of this lens. Like you can't disconnect it from things. And so people who are definitely in your membership and probably listening to this podcast get it, but not everybody gets it. And so go forth and spread the ABCs. Please continue. Yes, ripples, definitely.
Well, this has been so much fun. Can you tell people listening where they can go to find your book, where they can go online to find you and get in touch?
Yeah, Dogwise is the publisher. So the Dogwise website has the book, Manage It, Hacks for Improving Your Dog's Behavior. You can find all my links and where to contact me directly on Instagram, JW Dog Training. And I'll see everybody online. That's where I spend a lot of my time.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, link to all of that in the show notes as well. Juliana, this has been a ton of fun. So from myself and everyone listening, we appreciate everything you do. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.